Fall preps. We'll just go and revert. I'm just using you guys' book, and we'll just talk about fall preps. We put leaves on shredded leaves on every bed. Instead of seeding cover crop. We're looking at the shredded leaves as a cover crop to protect the soil, to feed the soil, to prevent erosion, okay? And then there might be some beds like the garlic that we might plant too, because there are certain things that we can put in the ground in the fall. And then with the plants that we have growing, we're not gonna pull those out. We're gonna leave those in the ground. Those plants are going to die, the roots will stay, hold the soil, protect the soil that way. And if we're lucky, when the spring comes and the weather warms, we might have early things to eat. Like I had some killer spinach over here because of that. Okay, so that's the fall. And then we're also going to do our soil sample in the fall. In the winter, we're just going to rest. We're going to look at seed catalogs. We're going to fantasize about what the next growing season is going to look like. We're going to rest our bones. We're going to give the land a rest. We need that rest. The land needs to rest just like we do, and the winter's a good time for that. There's going to be spring work, late winter, early spring work. We're going to cut back the raspberry canes. We're going to prune the fruit trees, but that's a whole different class. But there's always going to be work to do, okay? Probably sometime in February, you're going to start having to think about growing plants. So you'd probably start your greenhouse work. That's when we do in February. But you want to make sure that if you're going to start growing plants in February, you want to be sure that you're doing your legwork to get your greenhouse space in October. If you're looking for greenhouse space in February, you're too late for that growing season. Okay? And then the spring. When the earth warms, usually St. Patrick's Day is about that time. Soil thaws. That's when we can start turning the earth. For us, the farmer's market starts May 1st. That's really early, but I want to go to the farmer's market. I need to have things. So I have to start thinking about that middle of March time to be turning those leaves in, aerating the beds, forking the beds, swivel hoeing the beds, putting compost on to get lettuce in so I can have things for that first farmer's market. Okay? And then it gets crazy. April, May, June, July, August are insane. So you got to think about taking care of yourself. Taking care of your work, but also taking care of yourself. And I don't know, everybody thinks agricultural is so chill. We have this American agrarian idea about how relaxed farming can be. And it is peaceful right now.
I would think.
But no. When it's game time and you need to get stuff done, and I'm sure you walked around the farm and saw a lot of things that we need to do. We need to stake the tomatoes, we need to do a lot of weeding, we need to seed, we need to pull plants, we need to build beds, we need to harvest produce, we need to correspond, we need to teach classes, we need to be good neighbors with our people around, we need to build compost piles. The list goes on. That's just today.
Yep.
Every day. How are you going to do it? What's your endurance? Hopefully the winter you're building up your reservoirs of strength. Yeah?
Yes.
And then hopefully you're surrounded by awesome people that are going to believe in the work and help you do the things that you as a group want to do. So that takes developing relationships with people and fostering those and caring for those like you would the soil. You don't want to extract just labor, you want to give back. So you got to think about how you're going to, work with the folks that are involved in this work with you. So that's my summer work, our summer work right now. All right? In the fall, say in October, that's when I want to do a soil sample. So I want to get a trowel that's clean. I want to get a bucket that's clean, and hypothetically there's not a lot of space around the farm that isn't in production right now, so we're just going to pretend this is our new bed, which is totally wrong because it's square, we're walking on it, right? It's not like that.
Yeah.
This is the after, this is the before. So I'm gonna look at my square. This might be like your community garden spot. Maybe this is gonna be more of like the big picture dream. Maybe this is just, we're up in the air looking down at 2 acres of land that you might have. And then this is how we're gonna do it. So I take my bucket, I take my trowel. I'm gonna take my trowel, I'm gonna go down 6 inches or so into the ground. And I wanna take about a teaspoon of soil from that. And then I'm gonna zigzag. I'm gonna go over to this side. I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna go down about 6 inches. And I'm gonna grab some more soil. Now, I'm in a position here at this, and then I would just go back and forth, zigzag.
How much distance is it depending on?
I feel like it does, you know, like on this, on this space, I do one in the cilantro, I do one in the garlic, I do one by Bishnu, and maybe I'd go do one by the scallions. So it depends on how much, you know, like some farms, if you have 100 acres, some farms might do 2 soil tests for the 100 acres. For here at City Farm, it's 3/4 of an acre. I'm doing 1 soil test for the whole farm. Is it?
Yeah.
There's no universal like size because every soil test costs you money. So if you have, you know, like I have done up to 5 soil tests per farm, but that's an expense that I don't need to do anymore.
Yeah, I feel like if you're like looking at a piece of land, like just with any kind of sampling of the grounds in general, if there are maybe like different features somewhere, it might be helpful to like choose, like that can help you plan where
Absolutely.
to sample from, because it might be different in certain spots.
Yep.
And like this, like a 100-acre piece of land, let's say it's completely empty, like not even a tree or something, like nothing.
Right.
That you'll probably approach that differently than this, where it does have stuff, houses, sewers, etc.
Exactly.
So that makes sense.
Does that make sense? So like if this was my garden plot, I do a zigzag pattern in there for this size.
You want to make sure the variety is section.
Yeah.
So now the question is, you say October in the fall or in the spring. Does that mean we should avoid from vegetation?
No, so I'm gonna say like I would recommend doing a soil sample in the fall.
In the fall.
In the fall, in October.
Yeah. So that means that's after all the vegetation is harvested.
It doesn't necessarily, because I feel like if I have vegetation in here, I can still work around the plants.
Okay.
And no, that's a great question. I can still work around the plants.
Because sometimes, you know, the root system, they affect the soil.
Absolutely.
System.
Yep.
So, you know.
Yep. So yeah, I would work around, if I'm working in a bed like this, I would just work around the plants. But over here, it's just like, this is just open space, so it just seemed really easy. So then I would just take another sample like here. You know, the soil's really compacted. But we go down about 6 inches. And you can see all this organic matter. Okay, and then I do the same thing. And then I just mix all these soils together and I put them in a place to dry. Now, at City Farm, I have a greenhouse, so it's really easy. But at my home, I just put it on top of my refrigerator. I just put it in a place that's not gonna get dusty, where the cat's not gonna go, where my 7-year-old's not gonna get into it, you know, just in a place to dry it. Because what you're gonna do is after it's dried, probably like 2 weeks, you're gonna take that sample, you're gonna label it, however, City Farm Sample A. I'm gonna put it in a Ziploc bag. I'm gonna fill out my UMass Amherst soil sample test that you guys can get online. I'm gonna pay them $20-some. They're gonna give me my lead amount, my pH amount, my organic matter count, and my net micronutrients. Really, in the early days of my work, really what I was most concerned about was lead. And now I'm just really interested, because our lead is not a problem. Really what I'm interested now in is organic matter and my pH. Our nutrient levels, just because you'll see the obsessive compulsiveness of our work, that we don't have to suffer from any of that. But I want to make sure that my pH is really neutral. Okay?
Were you able to, like before acquiring this piece of land, you test it beforehand, or did you kind of go into it almost blind?
Well, so the farm's been here 20 years before I even started working here. So, but yeah, you kind of inherit, I feel like the biggest lesson about urban agriculture for me is that you inherit other people's messes, and then we're in the work of cleaning that up.
Yeah, that was like kind of my question, because like this is less close to some other parts, like, but if you go like a couple streets over, there's like a gas station.
Yep.
And so trying to find if there is available land in a city, like, is it something that's going to be like too contaminated with so many things, or so like deficient of so many things that it's not worth it to reinvest like into that parcel, or maybe to go somewhere else? I don't know. I
know, it's a big question.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why I feel like getting a soil sample is like the real, like base one, like the most important like thing.
That makes sense.
Does that make sense for the soil sample?
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, so in the fall, we cover all of our beds with leaves, shredded leaves. The city has all these trees, they drop their leaves, and we get shredded leaves that cover all of our beds, because we don't want any of the soil work that we've been doing all year long to be washed away by water or by winds. So what we want to do is we want to protect all that work that we've done, all that years of work, and keeping all that great soil right here on the farm. So hypothetically, because we don't have the beds available, because you guys are months after the fact that we've already done all this work, let's pretend that these wood chips, that could, with like some imagination, they could replicate what shredded leaves might look like. So all of our beds, all the 4-inch beds, all the 4-foot beds, all the ones with plastic, the plastic's ripped off, we put leaves down. And in the spring, when we're getting ready to plant, what we want to do is we want to take the shovel, we want to go straight down, we want to tip it over, and we want to take that top soil, the leaves, and we want to bring that right on and turn it right over. We want that earth to go right on top, and we want those leaves to go right down below. So every fall, we cover all the beds. We don't cover crop with seeds because we go into the late season of the farmer's market, and my cover cropping schemes failed because it wasn't warm enough for them to take. So we don't use any clover. I've tried. Winter rye, I've tried. What else have I tried? So many. They all failed. But instead, what we're doing is leaves. And we're going to turn that over, and we're just going to turn all that nice soil right on top.
Then if you don't cover the soil, wouldn't the soil dry up? When you turn it over, the leaves are going to be underneath the soil. How you keep the soil kind of like keep its moist?
Well, so we're doing this in the spring, right?
Yeah.
And then what will we do after we turn the beds?
Oh, you actually put the...
We're planting. So that's it. So all winter long, we're protecting the soil. And then when it's time to plant, we're turning the soil, and hopefully we're transplanting or direct seeding that very day. And then eventually, the plants that are working in close proximity together not only are thriving as individuals, they're shadowing out weeds.
Yeah.
They're providing leaf cover to prevent evaporation. Genius, right? All three things, all the things. You don't have to weed as much. Hopefully the water needs are being met, and the plants are thriving because they're close together. So we're in the fall, we're feeding the soil with shredded leaves. In the spring, we're taking those shredded leaves, we're turning it into the earth, because there's microorganisms in the earth, there are worms in the earth that are going to eat those leaves for food, poop it out, and then that's going to feed our soils. Then we're going to put compost on top, and then we're going to plant. Now there was like the green revolution, the idea of machines and chemicals coming into play, and and that has revolutionized the way in which food has been grown globally, and it has fed people in a substantial amount of ways. But the one thing that it lacks is the idea that it doesn't really build soil, but it also seems to desertify the land in which we're trying to grow food. And then it's debatable even the nutritional values of those foods may or may not be worthy. I feel like that seems to be like where we're going down the road right now. So John Jevons wrote this book, How to Grow More Vegetables. I highly recommend it. So he was like, look, you've got finite resources. B.F. Schumacher says small is beautiful. If we can create a planting system that maximizes space with plants, maybe we could grow more food that way sustainably. So this is parsley right here. And it should be in a 4-3 pattern, but it looks like it might be a little bit of a miss. The garlic is it's probably like a 7-8 pattern, and it's all based on spacing. The scallions here are about 2 inches apart, and they're growing in close proximity to one another. The husk cherries are in a 3-2 pattern. They're over by the black plastic, and the basil there is bio-intensively planted, about 6 inches apart. And then on the other side of Bishnu and Ellen are tomatoes. So the idea is that a plant, if you look at a seed packet, a plant is going to tell you that it needs 2 feet of space. But a lot of times the way in which food is grown is machine use. So it's really easy to have 2 rows of parsley when a tractor is going over the top of it that can just cut it down, and if it's bunched by the machine or not, it's just an easy machine way of doing it. But by the John Jevons approach, the How to Grow More Vegetables idea, we're doubling our ability to grow parsley. So instead of having 100 bunches of parsley every week, we're getting 200 bunches of parsley a week. Now that is on human, we're not doing any machines here. So does that make sense? So in the book, How to Grow More Vegetables, it has all these different crops and the spacing needs of each. And it's a grid. It's like a pattern. If you played basketball, it's like a 2-3 zone. You take up a good amount of space with a little bit of height. Okay? And the idea is that this plant in isolation isn't growing as well like us unless it's growing around in a community of other plants. So, does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes me think of just like Three Sisters planting.
Three Sisters planting, the same idea, companion planting.
Yeah.
So this isn't diverse like the Three Sisters, the beans, the pumpkins, and the corn. This is all about like you thriving in the community surrounded by the people that make you thrive.
Yeah.
Same idea.
Yeah.
Okay, does that make sense? Biointensive growing, there's a great book about it. I'm not saying go buy it. It's at the library, just read it and see, okay? So you can see these are the biointensive lettuces, so you can see how they're growing together.
The growing pattern for parsley was?
It's like well, it depends on, so all of our beds, so I guess just to get into it, so all of our beds are 4 feet across.
Okay.
So Maddie, if you and I were working at City Farm together, the idea is that you and I would be a pair. We're a team.
Okay.
So the idea is that once the beds are shaped, they're never walked on.
Yeah.
So the idea is that if we're weeding this out, like we can work together and talk, and then we can work and not have to step on the bed.
Yeah.
So if you took your finger, and everybody can do this right over here, the idea of these double dug beds, and I'll talk about that in just a second, is that we want our finger to go through right down deep. And if you took your finger and you did the exact same thing, see what happens.
How deep? Like a whole finger?
Yeah, just whatever, however deep you can go, right? Everybody,
yeah.
It looks like everybody can go up to their knuckle.
So it's like loose.
So then if you take your finger again and you try to do it in the walkway, do the same thing with all your might.
Yeah.
All right? So we went down to the subsoil here. We alleviated the compaction. We added organic matter to it. And then we put compost on top. So what we're trying to do is our biointensive growing practices with our bed making is that they're permanent. People don't walk on it to compact it. And in the end, the result that we want it to be like chocolate cake. So if you think about all your like characteristics of a delicious chocolate cake, it's going to be light and fluffy. It's going to be moist. It's going to be dark in color. And that great frosting on top is going to be compost.
Delicious.
All right? We don't want it to be like a brownie. We want the walkway to be like a brownie. Dense, right? But we want that water to seep through. We want the nutrients to seep through. We want those roots to be able to expand out. We want all of that to happen there. Okay, permanent 4-foot, these beds are always the same. Right here, we're gonna talk a little bit about compost. This is a fresh pile. So if you walked into the farm, you can see we're getting material from a coffee roaster that we're using for compost. We're getting coffee grounds from the White Electric, and we're getting food scraps from the from Bootstraps. They have a curbside pickup, and they're picking up people's food scraps, and some of those are coming here. And then we go to the Roger Williams horse stables and get manure and bedding. So every week we're putting food scraps down as our nitrogen. We're covering it with coffee grounds. We're covering it with bedding and straw and manure. And then we're putting a last layer of that on top of that. So it's a 1 part nitrogen is our food scraps to roughly 3 parts carbon, which is everything else. So once a week we're building those piles, and they grow until they get to a size like this, and then they'll shrink, and then we go to the next pile, we extract the stuff out, we take a shovel, we sift it by hand, and then we dump it on the fields. And when this one's done, we put cardboard down at the bottom so we don't leach all that great stuff from the compost pile. We put food scraps down first, coffee grounds, manure, bedding, and then the chaff from the coffee roasters. Really easy every week. And then we take this pry bar, and you give up your gym membership because you don't have to go to the gym anymore, and you aerate the soil, just like a fire. The nitrogen carbon combo, 1 part nitrogen to 3 parts carbon, is going to create heat. And when you aerate the pile, it's going to give it oxygen for some more heat. Okay? Seems like the food scraps and the coffee grounds never have us having to water our compost pile. I've never had to put water on our compost pile ever. You don't want it to dry out. But if you don't have a 3 parts carbon, 1 part nitrogen, you're going to have problems. You're going to have a pile that's too dry and it's not going to decompose, or you're going to have a pile that's too wet and it's not going to decompose and it's going to smell bad. So it's really important. And I feel like it's not like a mathematical thing. We're not like picking a weighted barrel and we're making sure that there's 10 pounds of food scraps and 45 pounds of carbon. I'm going to roughly estimate that this right here is 1 part food scraps, and 3 of these is going to be the carbon needs that I need. And you can see the results. So if we take this off here, and we can put it right on here, and we hand rub it out. And this is what the finished product looks like. Okay?
There's an earth form. Okay.
There might be, there should be. Okay. The leaves get turned under. The leaves get used as mulch. The bed gets forked. The bed gets planted. After that crop runs its course, we take those crops out and we compost them. We take a fork, we take a swivel hoe, we do it again, we take compost, we put it on the bed, and this is what it looks like. This is unwatered. This was direct seeded with arugula and sassy greens.
Pull the plants out right then and there, or do you compost them? When do you compost?
I only want to pull plants out when I want to plant like that. Late in the fall, I want to keep everything in because those plants have created a root structure that are going to keep your soil intact, right? So you want to keep that there. We'll take those out in the spring. But like this lettuce will die, but those roots will stay in the ground. And then in the spring, after they've been covered with leaves, we'll just turn them under. And then sometimes it's cool because like maybe like in the fall, like we have this spinach right here. Like if I was to pull that spinach out of the ground and throw it on the compost pile, that would probably be okay. But if it's a mild winter, guess what that spinach does? It goes dormant. And then when it warms up, you have your like first greens to eat in the season. The kale, the collards. Mike, I had these kale plants that looked so good in January because it was mild, but that February cold that came through, that 2-week spell that was super cold, decimated all those. They were ready to do like, I was ready to have the sweetest collard greens ever. It didn't work out. So the spinach is a hardy, it's a heat sensitive plant. We're gonna harvest it one more time. All these spinach plants are gonna be yanked out probably late Friday or early a week from today. We're gonna throw them on the compost bin. We're gonna take our forks. We're gonna fork the bed. We're gonna take the swivel hoe. We're gonna swivel hoe the bed. Then we're gonna put compost on top, and then we're gonna plant something again. Okay? So over here, in real time, we have arugula and sassy greens that have been harvested. They are heat sensitive. They do not like the sun when it gets super hot. And especially if you don't water them regularly, they want to go to seed. So we're going to yank these guys out. We've harvested these 2 times. Usually I feel like with leafy greens, I feel like before they go to flower like the tatsoi, you can get multiple harvests, especially in the early parts of the season. So we're going to wipe all that out. That's step 1. That's going to go on the compost pile. Step 2 is like Maddie and I, once again, we're getting to be buds because we're like into this work and we have a lot to learn from one another. We can just go through with the fork. 3 on one side. You want to do it? 3 on one side, 3 on the other.
Okay.
Just like so. And you can see how nice and easy that goes.
That's like so.
So that's step 2. And then step 3, we take the swivel hoe and we take it and we just disrupt the roots. Just like that. And then we take compost and then we have a rake. And then I take this side of the rake. And this is like the butter knife for the frosting. And I want to make it like a plateau. So the raised bed goes like that. This is the walk space, size of my foot. By having a raised bed that's domed like that, you get 20% more growing space. It's easy to see. If you walk around and I do something and you get really mad at me and you step on the bed, that's like a passive-aggressive act here at City Farm. So hopefully if I do something wrong, you'll just like straighten me out. But usually with people, when they step on the bed, they know, like, oh my gosh, Rich is gonna be so upset. We gotta talk it out, right, Ellen?
It was my first day on the farm, yeah.
I feel like everybody does that, you know? It's just like, oh, please don't step on the bed. But people learn pretty quickly, and then they also become the ambassadors of that as well. So that's our bed making. You can see we've got, this garlic was planted around Halloween because garlic repels vampire. It's a really easy day to remember. It doesn't have to be on Halloween, it can be around Halloween. And over on the other side of Ellen is a bunch of straw where we planted basil. So that's one of our mulches. Leaves we've talked about as being another one. And then the other mulch that we use at City Farm is the black plastic. So it's going to retain water. The black's going to attract sunlight and make the soil really warm. What about the plants that are in there? Do they like the heat or do they like the cool? They like the heat. And basil and tomatoes don't necessarily thrive in our like wonky, wacky, New England, unpredictable climate. So they have diseases that are soil borne, and so the plastic acts as a little bit of a buffer there.
Like, I like know some things about them, but I don't, not that they have to be good or bad, but like how they're like not causing nutrients to decay, but like, you know, what is the word? Things are decaying, they're eating those things, and like whatever. But what happens if there's like a lot of?
I've never had a problem with it. I want to like foster a habitat that's like where everything's like thriving, and I'm not having crop. I'm not having soil depletion because of the roly-polies, and I'm not having any crop damage for roly-polies.
So do you? I'm assuming you do crop rotation.
I do as much as I can.
I think that is one of the ways to mitigate that any pest infestation going on. But my question is, I lost my. Sorry, it will come back.
Okay. So like rotating crops as much as we possibly can, always. Feeding the soil every time we take something out, always. So the depletion is never there. So the lettuce here, I've grown the lettuce here for as long as I've been here pretty much. I don't rotate these crops, they're the same. But I'm feeding the soil, the soil is getting composted at least 3 times and leaves for a 4th. So there's 4 times during that year that soil's being fed. And Jake laughs at this, but this is like one of my favorite things. I don't know what my overall, I've been here for 20 years. That's a long time. Maybe there's like a legacy idea, maybe not. I don't know, right? But I feel like when I first came to the farm, I love the idea of having like the circle over there as a space for meeting and gathering and community building and other places around the farm to create that space. But this was all just grass. And so this is like 20 years of soil building that replicates the forest floor. So Bishnu's on a slope. And you can see all this grass was all the same level, right? Because you could just take a lawnmower, it'd be like your lawn in your yard. But this is 20 years of soil building right here. And if you go to the on the other side behind Jennifer where the strawberries are, that's another example of 20 years of soil building. So there were these little pockets of things that I was just hoping to make part of our growing cycle. We've got this giant silver maple that's about 150 years old. Spinach does really well with a little bit of shade. So I'm working with my natural environment, not having to cut this tree down. That'd be a shame, but working with it as much as I possibly can. Cool, so the last thing is seaweed. And we've talked a little bit about it. It's like my favorite thing because it's a Rhode Island state right. It's in our Constitution that you can go and you can get seaweed at any beach legally in Rhode Island to put on your garden for agricultural purposes. So in the fall we do that, and we try to put it in all of our beds.
How do you actually go to gather it? Do you just like bring like a giant?
We bring a truck with a bunch of garbage cans and a bunch of burlap bags and some forks like we fork the bed with, and we go to the beach and we gather it up, we put it in there and we put it right on the beds. We're not worried about the salt water because the mineralization in there is really good for the plants, and we put it on our compost bins.
Oh, you put it in the compost bins, not directly on the bed.
We do both.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, we put it on the beds and we put it on the compost bins.
Okay.
All right?